You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Kay from Ross Kay Realty Consultants. Welcome to the show, Ross.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me back.
A lot of interesting topics to talk about that we're going to hit today. The CMHC telling us that all of a sudden Toronto real estate is risky. How come a month ago they said it was okay? Also, the China syndrome, the downturn in the Chinese economy. Will that mean more Chinese money coming to Vancouver real estate or less? And of course, what's going to happen to interest rates in the long term or short term? First of all, CMHC says Toronto is a very risky market now, but Vancouver is the least riskiest market in Canada. Is this an accurate thing, and why have they made such a radical change on the Toronto market?
Well, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up, Jim, because I really can't understand with what's gone on and right now I really can't understand with why they went public with that last week. When you look at the Toronto market, the GTA in particular, so when you're talking about Toronto, you're talking about the entire GTA, which moves out a substantial distance. It's about anywhere up to about a 25-mile perimeter of the city of Toronto, downtown city of Toronto itself. So this is no different than when you talk about Vancouver. Vancouver, you can't concentrate on just the small part of Vancouver where you're seeing these excessive sale prices take place for single detached homes. That's always part of any real estate market. And that happens whether it's a small town Canada or it happens whether it's a major metropolitan area. So when CMHC came out last week with the warning over Toronto, we started laughing. And we started laughing is because if you look at the numbers for Toronto itself, Toronto has remained almost perfectly level since May. So the GTA market from the end of April forward, right on through till the end of July, that market has not changed one iota. The sales are taking place the exact same way. House prices are expanding on the exact same pace. Nothing has changed one iota. Yet for some reason, CMHC decided that they're going to red flag Toronto. Now let's hold on for a second. Let's flip over to the Vancouver call, because I think as you addressed, Jim, they said that Vancouver was the least risky market in Canada?
That's right.
Okay, so let's look to Vancouver. When we look at Vancouver, we see that there was a surge in sales in the month of July, and the sales actually increased by over 2.4%. So that was a substantial surge in sales. Now, we can go back in a few moments and discuss the foreign buyer myth and what this reading that I'm talking about, how that can be applied to your foreign buyers. But that said, Vancouver accelerated and Toronto remained constant. Yet CMHC came out and made a claim Toronto is at risk. I think we've talked about this extensively. When we review CMHC data, when we review the CMHC reports, when we review what the bank economists have been saying, because they've all been pretty much, those economists seem to all share the same information and they seem to hold the same beliefs. I think we've talked about that in the past. But it's consistent with what they say, and it's always consistent. But for some reason, CMHC, during an election, decided to come out and place the Toronto market at risk. I'm never one to hold a conspiracy theory. But in this particular instance, I wonder what are the odds that CMHC would come out in the market that the Conservatives are hoping to draw votes from to get reelected, that they would come out and they would put a red flag on the Toronto real estate market? Why did they not do it in Vancouver where the market actually surged? Well, I think the opportunities for the Conservatives out in BC are not that high, but I think the Conservatives are counting very highly on doing pretty well in the Toronto's GTA market, as they have in the past. What I'm really concerned about, and I know this is right off base, I've got no proof of this, But I believe that CMHC realizes, after us berating them now for over a year, that they've been caught with their pants down. I think they understand that the way they read real estate markets is totally incorrect. I think that they realize that the information they've been passing up their own hierarchy within the system to their board of directors, to the president of CMHC, all of a sudden is going to be proven to be wrong. I think it's in CMHC's best interest to have a change of government take place, because then as the housing market fully rolls out the correction across Canada, that the history that CMHC had with the Conservatives, where the Bank of Canada went out and made interest rate cuts, CMHC revised policy to stimulate the market, all of those changes that took place over the last 2 years, or since May of 2013, those would all be wiped under the carpet if a new government comes in place. And the blame can move from CMHC's market intelligence onto the old Conservative government. When I'm sitting here looking at the data, Jim, when I see Vancouver surge after it going through a 3-month period of a flat market. Now, the flat market, when I'm talking about that, is the market was accelerating on the exact same path between April and June. In July, it surged ahead 2.4%. That 2.4% is unaccounted for. So, but the reverse happened in the GTA, where that market has remained constant. That market has remained on the exact same pace it was on for the last 3 months. Toronto's been red flagged, Vancouver hasn't. Now, if you delve into this a little deeper, if you read the reasons that CMHC is reporting to the public, these are the same reasons they're reporting to the government, the Bank of Canada, everybody else, the banks. There's no logic in their reason. They do not have a single point to substantiate it. They're going back to this old HPAA, house price analysis framework, and they are making the same judgments that they created, that they issued the first time they released in November. But magically, Toronto's in the red. Magically, everything's okay in Vancouver. It just seems very, very strange to me that took place. Now, all that being said, in all fairness, the GTA market has not changed one iota as of right now. The market has been flat, staying on the exact same pace for the last 3 months. Vancouver, in July, so the 3 months prior, April to June, remained the same. July, it surged forward. Now, whether that has something to do with your discussion about foreign buyers and the Chinese situation, time will tell. But all I know is the call that CMHC made last week was not supported in their own statistics. If they supported that in their own statistics, they would not have gone ahead and changed Toronto from 1 month being fine to the next month. 30 days later, they're saying that it's overpriced. It's at risk for a house price correction.
Well, I found it interesting, the reasons they said in Toronto, well, incomes haven't gone up and there are 70,000 condos on the market. Well, Ozzy Jurock, who's the big condo king in Vancouver, he was saying, oh my God, Vancouver had 7,000 new condos coming on the market. Yet, proportionally, when you look at population and so on, that's not really out of line or that much different.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of variables that play into that, Jim. So when I'm commenting, please understand that if you're listening to what I'm saying, there is a lot of foundational research that goes into these statements, and you can't just listen to what I'm saying and then go out there and put it into practice. But with that being said, what I'll say this is, these developers, the banks, CMHC, view demand based on simple demographics. What they say is we see this number of new family being formed, based on these number of families being formed, and that includes new immigrants coming in, immigrant families. We're projecting this kind of demand on the housing supply. Well, that would be fine if all of these condos were being built perfectly to align with the demand that those people were going to have. But that is not the case. The condos have been targeted at specific types of home buyers, and the changes in demand do not align with what those builders have built. So to say that the demand is there to support these condominiums is simply an irrational, ignorant comment, because without breaking down the market into its individual demand components, you can't say the stock that's being built is going to be even in demand at all. In other words, if you're building a $400,000 condominium that you're hoping to sell to a first-time buyer couple, you're in a marketplace like Toronto or Vancouver where you're trying to get as much money for your condominium per square foot as possible. You've shrunk the square footage to make the price point more palpable for the publics. In other words, they can qualify to get the financing. And in that, you've shrunk the size of the unit that it is no longer possible for a family with 3 or 4 people to move into it. If the families being formed, i.e. immigration or 2 families coming together, are larger, have a larger demand in square footage than what that builder is building, that home is going to sit vacant. That home will not sell.
Ross, I want to ask a phenomena that they have in New York and wonder if it happens here. Is people in New York will buy the small micro apartment, but with a mind that perhaps if they have a family, they'll need more room. They will go and buy the apartment next to it and sublet it until they have kids, and then they remove the wall between the two of them. Does that happen here in Canada, or is it even legal to do that?
Not even legal to do it. These condominiums are not designed by the architects to have interior walls removed. Now, if there's a builder who's building and he's saying, buy 2 units because our architects have designed this wall to be removed 10 years from now, then that would be an option. But that has not taken place in Canada, and I do not think you can find, I would appreciate if someone did know about it, they forward me the architectural drawings that would support these interior walls being removed. Because you have to understand, an interior wall is not a lot of these interior walls are still load-bearing walls. So the condominium rules and regulations prevent those walls from being knocked out to make one super apartment. The flip side of that is when we're talking about these micro apartments and we're talking about New York City. New York City is constrained in how people can move. So when you look at Vancouver and you look at Toronto, there are not the same constraints transportation-wise that there is in New York. You can live in Oakville, you can live in Guelph, you can live in Kitchener, and you can still commute to Toronto every single day with no problem at all. There are massive amounts of land that are vacant in that corridor that could still be built upon. In Vancouver, you're already seeing it, as Fraser Valley is has seen some price point move, as people from Vancouver City itself simply say, no, prices are too much, we're just going to move out into the suburbs a little bit. And that's why when you're talking about housing market, your listeners really should pay more attention to the provincial numbers than they do from the local real estate boards, which generally only talk about one supermarket being the major market that impacts their members in terms of sales. So the supermarket for the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board is the city of Vancouver itself. The outlying areas are part of their market, but it's not part of their core market.
Well, Ross, I mean, I can say I know the attitude about Vancouver, too. People say you live all the way out in Burnaby. I live 2 blocks outside of the city of Vancouver, and it saved me $150,000 when I bought my condo. The exact
How many minutes did it cost you, Jim?
4.
Cost you 4 minutes.
Because I have one series of big lights I have to go through. So,
right, but you see, this is what housing economists and housing analysts don't understand. They don't understand how human beings buy and sell homes and what decisions those human beings make for their family. I chose to live out in Burlington versus living in downtown Toronto because A, it was far cheaper, and B, it provided me a lifestyle I would never have in downtown Toronto. There is only a select demographic, a select group of any population who says, I don't care if I got to live in a 400 square foot condo that costs me $800,000. I'm going to move to downtown New York, and I'm going to go ahead and pay $800,000. That is simply irrational thought. it is not substantiated in the patterns that buyers follow. I can tell you personally, dealing with over 3,000 unique buyers, they never buy houses that way. The number one question is this: Ross, we can afford this much money. Ross, this is where we'd like to live, but we know we can't afford it. Or if we do move there, we're going to get less for our money. Ross, what are our options if we move out here? That's the same thing that's gone on since the second house in Canada was built. You cannot look at single detached homes in downtown Vancouver and think that you're going to make a comparison against the entire BC housing market, because it doesn't work. It defies logic. It defies the principles for which all housing markets operate under. Now, who's that condo guy that you mentioned out there, Jim?
Ozzy Jurok.
Right. So I read Ozzy's comments before. So had Ozzy called me before he was putting up his condominium, and he said, Ross, I'm going to put up this condominium. What price point should I be building units to? And what amenities should I be putting in my building to suit the target market that I'm going after? I would give him a full outline of where the demand in the market exists today. Do you know where the demand actually exists in the Canadian marketplace today, Jim?
I'm not the real estate expert. You tell me.
Okay, but you know, Jim, because you're probably that target market. As boomers, people who have owned homes for 30 to 35 years are now getting ready to retire. They have no homes to move into. There are no developments in the works right now in Canada today. I mean, there's a couple little tiny ones, but those are offshoots. There's no developments that are going on that will allow someone in those $1 million houses, as we start to move just a little away from city center or downtown Vancouver, that would justify them selling those homes to move. The builders haven't built those. If builders think that someone's going to move from a beautiful detached home with a nice yard in a nice neighborhood where they've spent the last 20 years into a high-rise condominium that is been built like it's for a first-time buyer, those builders are wrong. And that's what's causing this price inflation across Canada. There is a constrained supply of properties for boomers to move out of their existing home into. The risk that's been created because of that is that the amount of equity that's tied up in those homes is increasingly under more and more risk. So when we look at the comments of CMHC, we look at the comments of the building industry, we look at the comments of the bank economists who claim demand is X when demand is actually Y, Z, T, and Z, then you have a problem. And this is where there's a disconnect from reality and myth in real estate.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay from Ross Kay Realty Consultants. Ross, you said they're not building the kind of development that boomers want to move into. So, if, say, the typical boomers in a 4-bedroom house with a big back and front yard, what kind of a home would they like to move into?
Well, what they'd like to probably move into, it would be a condominium type setup where it's a single level bungalow of enough size that they're not giving up anything on the main level, where has a full basement so that if their children come home or they have guests, they have a place to stay. That doesn't need to be above grade room. They certainly do not want to get away from the modern style that homes have been built under for the last 15 years, which means 9-foot ceilings are still preferred. They certainly are smart. They like eco-friendly homes. They like homes that are energy efficient. They still want a garage so that they can park their car because they're really not going to go to transit. They prefer it to be located close to shopping, so when the time comes that they can't drive their car any longer, maybe they can take an electric scooter, a golf cart, a taxi, or the local bus, if the cities make the bus service senior friendly, to those local shopping areas. They prefer that it's built near a hospital, or that at least when it's being built, the development by the city planners includes some portion of the land to go to for healthcare services, which are tied to that population as it ages, creates tremendous employment opportunities, Jim. Tremendous employment opportunities, not only from the homes being built, but from the jobs that are created from these new areas. You're allowing those homeowners to move out of the houses that they're in now, which takes the pressure off that supply side in the marketplace, what effectively lowers the affordability for first-time buyers getting into the market, as the supply of houses for people to move up to is no longer constrained. But for some reason, nowhere in Canada is one municipality taking this on and working towards it. Now, in Ontario, Kitchener-Waterloo, they looked at this and they decided that they were not going to allow, they were going to restrict building permits for large 4-bedroom, 2-story detached homes on large lots, and they were going to focus on giving building permits downtown into the condo. Now, they have been somewhat successful there, and I applaud the planners in that community for being that forward thinking, but they stopped short. They didn't realize that I am not going to move from my detached home with a nice lot and move into a condominium unless I have to or I want to. And I don't want to right now, and I don't have to. I'm 78 years old, for the sake of the argument, still in my detached house. I can still cut the grass. I can still get the leaves out of the eaves trough. That's where I get my personal enjoyment out of life. You know, I don't want to be sitting there reading books all day. I want to be active. These realities are not being reflected in the building permits that the cities are issuing. So when I hear the Vancouver city planner talk about issues with constrained supply in the city of Vancouver, what I'm actually hearing is that's someone who doesn't understand how the market operates. That's someone who hasn't been educated in how people flow through their lifetime of ownership. It's someone who doesn't understand if you have $1 million in equity in your house, you're not going to be forced into a $400,000 condominium unless you want to be.
China, economic slowdown. Does that mean that more money will be coming out of China to go and look for real estate, or less money?
Okay, so I think what everybody needs to understand about the Chinese investor, or the Chinese foreign buyer who would be purchasing in Vancouver. Each country has its own culture of real estate. In other words, it's a culture, a belief in real estate that has grown over decades or centuries in the case of China. When someone from China buys real estate, they look at it with a 30-year plus objective in their mind. They don't look short term. That's why you may see some Chinese investors purchasing properties in Vancouver and those properties sitting vacant. They don't care. They purchased that home with the understanding that they may not even move into the property for 5 to 10 years. It is a minimum 30-year investment for them. This has been a well-known fact in the real estate market for decades here in Canada. So back in the 80s, it's no different than it is today. The culture of Asian buyers coming to Canada, specifically Chinese buyers, is that they look at real estate as a 30-year minimum investment. Canadians, on the flip side, look at real estate as a 7-year investment. So the Canadian population views real estate totally different than a Chinese, someone from China does. So when you hear market commentators making comments about the Chinese economy is going to impact whether or not Chinese buyers come and buy more real estate in Vancouver, it just simply doesn't hold water. They are not going to change centuries-old culture of home buying, beliefs of real estate, and then come here. The plans that they had 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, last week, this week, next week, they won't change at all. Now, that being said, Jim, Vancouver, on our last reading, saw a 2.4% surge in sales that were not a result of a previous sale in the real estate market. So we have not seen a surge in Vancouver, the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board, so for Vancouver itself, since March of 2014. So March of 2014, we saw a 4% surge. So it's possible that there might have been a little bit of rush or something to get some money out, and maybe that money came in a little bit in July. It'll still take us another 2 months to see if that's reciprocated by sales going forward. But at most, we're only talking about 2% of the market anyways. So in terms of affordability for people buying in Vancouver, what foreign buyers are doing has no bearing on that at all.
Interest rates, will we be seeing them go up this fall?
Okay, so interest rates. Another myth and misunderstanding about real estate. What matters about interest rates is, what is my renewal rate going to be? The only people who care about today's interest rate are first-time buyers. Low interest rate for first-time buyers allow them to spend more money while making the same monthly payment. It's a mistake that they're making, but that's how real estate agents sell them houses. So first-time buyers should always buy their first house on a 17-year amortization with a minimum 10% down, and they should take a mortgage payment, monthly mortgage payment, equal to the 10-year rate. So I'm going to exclude those people from this discussion. I've just given them the advice that they need. If you follow my advice as a first-time buyer, you will earn an extra 20% over the course that you own real estate, just simply by following that simple procedure. 17-year AMs is what you buy your property at. Whatever I qualify for a 17-year AM, that's the most that I'm going to spend. Okay, so now let's go back to interest rates as a discussion, rising interest rates. Are interest rates going to rise? Yes, obviously interest rates are going to rise. Pretty much every expert in the United States is saying that, although we're not going to see 7-8% interest rates like we did a while ago. But what people don't understand is that's irrelevant. What you have now is a new set of home buyers, the millennials, who are going to be owning real estate in the first 7 to 10 years of ownership, unlike what has gone on since 1980. So between 1980 and 2015, July of 2015, 98% of all mortgage renewals happened at a lower rate than what they were originally taken out at. So let that sink in for a second, Jim. You have an entire nation who for 35 years has lived in a housing culture where the expectation was that when I go to renew my mortgage, I will be renewing it at a lower interest rate. Over 98% of all mortgage renewals since 1980 happened at a lower interest rate. What we have commencing in August of this year, which is like right now, this is the risk window. Mortgage renewals, they're starting to take place this month, are at risk of being higher than the rate you took it out at 5 years ago. And as we go forward through 2016, 2017, 2018, it's no longer that it's odds, it's a certainty that you will be renewing your mortgage at a higher interest rate than what you had when you took it out originally. That is the first time that has happened since October of 1979. So since October of 1979 until August of 2015, we have a whole generation or generations of home owners who owned in an environment of falling interest rates. The next generation, the millennials, are entering it at a time of rising interest rates. And what that means is the speed which they're able to build equity in their property for the millennials will never compare to what the boomers experience. Because the millennials will not be able to accrue enough equity in their house, it means they won't be able to move up to more expensive houses as quickly as we did from 1980 till about 2010. So this next group going forward is where you're going to see the fallout of interest rates. So yes, I think, I'm not an interest rate expert. I prefer to let the experts on the bond market, which dictates interest rates, by the way. It's not the Bank of Canada. It's what the bond market says. I mean, that's never going to change. It's just the way it is. I prefer to let experts in the bond market comment where the interest rates are headed. Listening to the experts that I've listened to, it doesn't appear we're going to see any crazy interest rates. Crazy, by the way, today means over 7%. When I started, crazy was under 10%, by the way. We dreamed of under 10% mortgages. But a 1% interest is absolutely going to kill people in an environment where they're not getting raises. People don't understand. If I was to ask, Ross, who's moving right now? Ross, who can afford to move right now? Well, it's those public service workers who have guaranteed or who have experienced income appreciation over the last decade. So that means your teachers, some of your public sector unions, some of your municipal employees, some of your, your private education employees. I mean, there's a broad category of people, police officers, firemen. These people all have received raises. They've received raises in a declining interest rate environment. So when the mortgage comes up for renewal, they're the ones who move. They're the ones who build equity. They're the ones who are getting wealthier. The millennials are not going to see that opportunity.
Ross, it's been great talking to you.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
My guest has been Ross Kay from Ross Kay Realty Consultants. His website, rosskay.com. That's Ross, ROSSKAY.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.